feel very honored to speak here in front of you, and I would like to thank Susie for inviting me and all of you for being here and listening. The topic of my speech is the science of change, campaigning. I'm not going to tell you how to achieve change, because all of you do achieve change and your projects speak their own language. So what am I going to talk about in the first place? It's the science aspect of change. It took me 35 hours to get here yesterday due to a storm, and 35 years ago I ran my first campaign against the toxic waste disposal in the village where I grew up. And then it took until 1996 when I realized that change always follows certain patterns. By that time I had been working for Greenpeace. I spent 13 years between 1984 and 1997 working for Greenpeace, and I realized that no matter what the topic is, no matter what the goal is, there are certain patterns and certain rules that always apply when you want to change something, or what we called at Greenpeace when you want to do campaigning. And as a result, 20 years ago, I started writing down a concept, a model. I'm showing you just an impression. I'm not going to explain this perfectly in detail, especially as it's in German. I haven't translated yet. You could call this the architecture of change, and it contains checklists and definitions that can be applied when you plan a campaign. So this model is for planning, executing and evaluating campaigns or change projects, and also for training campaigners. This is another way to see it that shows more the dynamic aspect, and that you have to keep planning in a rolling way, because you achieve something, the situation changes, you need to adapt the plan. And here you see the different checklists connected to it. But I'm not going to go into the details of all of that. I will just show you a few, we'll give you a few tools. But let me first talk about science. I made my master's degree in physics, and you know, physicists love to explain nature and reality through models. Models help us to predict the outcome of an action or information that you put into a system. They help you to calculate what will come out. And the same happens with a good campaign plan. Science is a systematic enterprise that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of testable explanations and predictions about the universe. And contains three basic assumptions: that there is reality, objective reality, that this reality is governed by rules, and that the outcome can be discovered or measured. And the same applies to a good campaign plan. It's about reality, natural laws, and measurement. More simply, science is about explaining and predicting phenomena. You replace phenomena by a situation, by like the introduction of the SDGs in Africa. Then a good campaign plan is about explaining how this is going to work and predicting the outcome. And then you can measure how successful you were. Over the course of time, I developed many definitions for the term campaigning, and one definition is that campaigning is the art of changing people's behavior, thinking, or attitudes in ways that help you achieve your goals. And this is very important. There are no states making decisions. There are no authorities, no companies, no organizations or administrations making decisions. It is always individuals. They work in these organizations, they follow certain rules of these organizations, but it all comes down to individuals. That means if you want to achieve change, you have to think of the individual. Because it is the individual you have to change. It's concrete actions and decisions taken by individual people. So when you think about it like that, you don't need to you don't need a different concept for, like, let's say, changing decisions in the UN compared to selling a product or winning an election. Because it's always about convincing individuals. And that explains why there can be something like the science of change. Because you have to answer the same questions and you have to follow the same rules. These individuals, they have their dreams, their needs, and their fears. That's one of the realities of campaigning. These are the triggers or the drivers of the decisions and of what they do. And you need to really understand them. If you've seen that already, you want to convince somebody to do something that he doesn't want to do, you really need to know that person. And don't act like we tend to do in such a situation. We start, for example, a marketing campaign or an awareness campaign, and we realize the audience doesn't react the way we would like them to react. So what do? We do more of the same stuff. Would you do that with the person sitting next to you when you realize your message doesn't trigger what you want to achieve? Would you just keep talking and talk more and more and more and more? Or would you step back, think, start to ask questions, try to understand that person better, and then change your argumentation, change the messages, or maybe stop communicating and offer something? Now the question is, are there tools that can help us systematically analyze people? And one such tool I invented based on another one that I read in a book in 2003, and I call it the forces analysis. It's about the forces that... Oh no, okay. Sorry. Yeah, no, I can hear myself also better. Thank you so much. It's about the forces analysis. It's about the forces that dominate a person's behavior. And the first one is folks. The folks around that person. Who are the people influential to that person? Who does this person listen to? Where does this person take advice? The objectives. What are the objectives of this person? What does he or she want to achieve in life or in this concrete situation? What are the goals? The third one, rules. What are the rules that this person applies to? We heard this morning 10% will never be corrupted and 10% will always be corrupted. So these people follow different rules, but they all follow rules. And you have to understand them. And then there are the conceptions or prejudices, belief systems that dominate a person's actions, beliefs, behavior, thoughts, and so on. Last, expectations. What does this person expect from your project if you're successful? What does she or her expect if you're not successful? Maybe there's a benefit if you're not successful. What do they expect in general in life? What are their dreams and what are the benefits that they expect from life? You have to know them if you want to influence a person. And the last one, scopes. Scopes in the sense of areas of interest or geographical areas that have an influence on that person. For example, or on a campaign. For example, you may remember in 1995, Greenpeace stopped an oil rig from being dumped in the Atlantic Ocean. The whole project was run by Shell UK, but Greenpeace ran the campaign in Germany. Because in Germany they could argue that if you're not allowed to dump a Coke can in the ocean, then Shell shouldn't be allowed to dump an oil rig in the ocean. It was a geographical area where the campaign could be won, while in the UK it could not. Or people are interested. Some people are interested in health. Others are interested in gains. You have to understand what scopes dominate the person's behavior. And if you answer all these questions, if you write it all down, you will see patterns, and it will help you to understand better what you have to do in order to achieve your goals. One of the first times when this was used was for the World Economic Forum, but I'll explain later what for. And the approach to let the target group determine what you do is called target group orientation, compared to elite group orientation, where you just communicate the way that you think is best for you, and you expect others to take exactly like you do. Different people need different approaches and different messages. Also the incentives, we heard this morning from Paul, different people have different incentives, you have to know them. And you always have to give an incentive. And if it's only the feeling of doing something good, some people will have to be paid. Some need a carrot, others need a stick. So you have to understand your target group, because the target group is king. No matter what you think, how good your product or your idea is, no matter how good you think you know how to sell it and to communicate it, it does not matter. The only person who decides if your message is relevant and important and will change their behavior is the target group or the target individual. Nobody else. So you can't change a person if you don't know him or real well. But how do you get to know a person really well? What will he say? If you want to get to know me. Wrong answer. Sam, what would you do?
I would ask the target group.
Ask. Ask the people. Just ask them. We forget so often how important it is to ask people. I once had to get people voluntarily not paid to a workshop. And I had no idea how would I get these people to the workshop. It was a certain target group. So I called 3 of them and I asked them, what do I have to do to get you to that workshop? They gave me the answer and we had 10 people at the workshop. So go and ask. That's true target group orientation. And if you want to have a perfect target group orientation, you involve the people. Don't plan a campaign or a change project. Get them involved during the planning stage. 2004, we ran a campaign with female students as a target group, and we had no idea where they got their information from, which messages were relevant, and so on. And we were thinking about 2 days, we were quite desperate until we got the idea. Let's do a strategy workshop, not with our clients, but with the target group. We invited 8 students. They developed the concept for the campaign, and luckily there was, for the same product, it was a product launch. For the same product there was an advertising campaign running, developed by communications specialists. We had 4 times higher market share than the classical advertising campaign. And not because we are very clever, because we were desperate and we had no idea what to do. And we asked, and we even involved them. We call this now the Target Community Lab. It's a workshop design that we invented. And since then we've been doing this again and again and again. And we were always surprised by the outcome. You get to know things that you never thought of. Another very modern way is artificial intelligence. We used this the first time last year during a referendum in Switzerland, where artificial intelligence helped us to understand the public opinion by analyzing online information. And we saw very soon that in which direction this campaign would go. So the question is, if you understand a person, then you also know what works. Because you know exactly what you have to do. And then here's something very important, and you will find this out when you do a target community lab or when you ask people. You will find out that all is communication, but communication is not all. Sometimes you need to do different things. Like, you can call at somebody to run, but sometimes you need to set a fire. Manage this. I have Okay. You see this coin? It has two sides. And I want you to remember this coin forever. It's a Swiss franc, 2 Swiss francs. Do not forget the coin, okay? It has two sides. One side is called communication, and the other side is called intervention. And communication, we all know. Intervention is what is the concrete action, whether you bring a new product on the market, whether you change a product, whether you invent something, like the SDG model of Hans. It's something that changes the world directly. You don't have to convince somebody. It does change the world directly. And campaigning is always the product of both. You always have to think of both sides of the coin, because sometimes you need more communication, sometimes you need to change something directly, but every time you need both, because in a mathematical sense, and you know I'm a physicist, 0 times 1 is 0, 1 times 0 is 0, and only 1 times 1 is 1. So there is always an aspect of one of them. In 2003, the World Economic Forum was under heavy protest. People were on the streets fighting the police, railroads were blocked, streets were blocked in Switzerland. They tried to explain what they do good for the world, what they understand under, as they said, improving the state of the world. They tried it through PR, they tried it through advertising, it didn't change anything. Then they called me, and we did an analysis, the forces analysis that I had shown you before. And the outcome of this was the Open Forum Davos, where the World Economic Forum had before been seen as a closed meeting of the mighty ones, deciding about the course of the world with no influence, and like anti-democracy, the end of democracy. And by opening up and by involving NGOs and inviting the public, this whole situation changed. So we developed this concept, and as a result, the protests went away. We'll see what happens next week when Donald Trump is in Switzerland. Maybe I'll get a call. The last... I have to be only on Wednesday night. The last tool that I would like to show you, asks you, helps you to start with the question why. When you start a new project, you need to win people to support you, always. If they are your employees and you want them to really work for you and not watch YouTube videos during the work time. If you want to win an investor, if you want to mobilize supporters, maybe get political support, you always have to answer the question why. And the next tool will show you how you get from the why to the what. Don't tell people what you do. This is an interesting marketing approach that I heard of a few years ago, because it matches exactly my experience. Don't start with what, start with why. And you can do this systematically through the 4 levels of planning. This is actually a model that was developed by a Swiss military consultant who worked for Napoleon first. Then he was kicked out by the French generals because he was too successful, and then he worked for the Russians. One of my ancestors actually was a Corse who came with Napoleon from Corsica and had to fight the Russians then. Thank you. So the first level of planning is what we call in a company corporate identity. I would call it the normative level. And it starts with the question, why are we doing this? What are the passions driving us to do this? What are the passions that brought all of you here? Some of you have had a long journey. And what vision of a better world is behind that? And you have to write that down. And a vision is always utopian. You can never achieve a vision. And you should never write down a vision that is not utopian. Then it's a goal. It has to be utopian. But then the question is, if it's utopian, then can I do something at all? Yes, you can. You can make a contribution. You can do as much as you can, not more. Just as much as you can, and that's the mission. And then from that derives the strategic level with the strategic goals. And here comes, after this comes the invention of the Swiss consultant. You know this situation probably. Most organizations and companies do two mistakes here. One mistake is to step from the strategic goals directly to the action. Our brain is not made for that. We'll see why. The other mistake is that you work yourself upside down, how to say, bottom up. You think of today, you think of the next goal you want to achieve, then you think of the goal after that. It's the wrong way. Think of the goal in 10 years, and then think about what has to change until then. What do we have to achieve in 9 years? And then what do we have to achieve in 7 years? And so on. Think backward. We had the discussion this morning about goals for the year 2063, right? 2065? The EU?
2063.
2063, yeah. There are two possible reasons for that. One reason is what was said, which is that we can push everything into the future, we don't have to do anything now. The other reason is that they actually plan for that long time. The Chinese have a concept of planning for 150 years, and I bet everything they do, the companies they buy, the streets they build in Africa, everything is determined by this long-term plan. Because that's simply how they function. And you can do this, because in this way, you plan for 10 years and you derive backward what you have to achieve in the next 2 or 3 years. Then you work on that. And then you do an analysis in a year. And in this year you see if you're on the right track or if the situation has changed. And then you can think about the goal in 10 years. It's still far away. You can still make amendments. You can set in another goal. You can change it a little bit. But at least you know the direction that you're going to. And that is very important. And the next mistake, to step directly or jump directly from the strategic level to the action level, can be avoided by this level that Jomini introduced. It's today we would call it the project plans, the operative level. We say, and we, by the way, I didn't mention that, but 20 years ago I started my own company, so I'm not with Greenpeace anymore. It's something people always think that you stay there forever. When we do a campaign, there's only one goal per campaign, or you can say it the other way around, one campaign per goal, or one project per goal. So for every goal that is here, you define a specific project, and projects are planned in phases, and then for the current phase, you know what you have to do, because the goals of this current phase is only a few months away, and you know exactly what you have to do. And like this, if you jump from the strategic goals directly to the actions, the question is always, what could we do? And it results in a lot of activism that leads nowhere. While if you break it down like this, you have a goal that is very concrete, and then you know what you have to do, and not what you could do, what you have to do. And that will help you to set priorities and do the right things. The very last slide, these are the rules that apply. I could talk a whole day about them. I would just like to mention two. The first one tells you, do something outstanding. Be different, be totally different than anybody else. If you look at different rock bands, for example, Kiss, everybody knows they're the ones with the
Makeup.
Makeup, yeah. Everybody knows that's Kiss. You don't need to know the music. You can discuss if the music is better or not compared to another band, but they're outstanding. You know them. And this is very important if you want to win followers, supporters to follow you. And the last one, build golden bridges, make it as easy as possible. Remove any hurdle for the people that you want you to help your project. So let's stop with a translation of a quote. Africa first, let's make Africa great again. Thank you very much.
Wow. Many thanks indeed. Another big round of applause. We still have 5 minutes.
Okay.
We can take